Hello and welcome to Economy and Markets TV, where we have conversations with a purpose. I'm your host, Dave Okenquist, the Senior Research Analyst here at Dent. Joining me each and every week is the editor of Boom and Bust, Mr. Rodney Johnson. Rodney, good morning.
Morning, Dave.
Rodney, are you ready to take us around the world of economic and financial news?
I am. 2 minutes or less, Dave. 2 minutes or less.
Can you do that, Rodney?
I can do it.
Okay, great. All right, let's get into the news of the week. Well, this was kind of a busy week. You know, we're past Thanksgiving. Now we're eyeing Christmas, but yet, you know, the world, lots of things are happening in the world, and it's important to cover all of it. Starting with the big news that came yesterday, and we're still not sure if it's real or not. We'll find out today at some point, which is possibly a real breakthrough in the U.S.-China trade war. This rumored phase one, which we've been hearing about for a long time, they may actually have a deal, Rodney. Sounds great. Stocks shot up really high on this news, didn't they?
The Dow's up 300 points. There's several things going on here. The trade deal's kind of been on again, off again for a long time, right? A year and a half.
Yeah.
Phase one, they broke it down because they couldn't get the whole thing done. Remember, it's supposed to be take down your tariffs or barriers to entry on the Chinese side, stop stealing our stuff, and stop forcing people to give you things,
Right.
you know, and get rid of all this basically copyright infringement.
Stop being China.
Well, and so all that's off the table. It's essentially, hey, let's just buy each other's stuff again on a little bit better basis than we had before. We
Right.
haven't solved the hard stuff. There were more tariffs set to go into effect on Sunday, another $160 billion worth of goods. The idea, as we understand it at the moment, but it's all kind of in flux because we're doing this before the Chinese press conference, which has now been pushed off half an hour, is that they will get rid of some of the tariffs. They will not do the ones that are supposed to come in on Sunday. The Chinese will agree to buy more agricultural stuff and some other things. I don't know what the benefit of this is so far. Nobody does because we don't have the details. But reducing instead of increasing tariffs is a boon to business. But I stick by what I've said for a year and a half now. Tariffs didn't make us buy less stuff. We bought a little bit less from China, but we moved it to supply chains from other countries in Asia. It won't make us buy more stuff for the tariffs to come off. And so I look at this, as I have for a long time, as a great indication for people to lock in profits, buy a put, hedge your portfolio, not because things are going to go to zero, but because the shiny is going to wear off. And it's just not going to be great afterwards. It's going to be kind of back to the same old thing.
Yeah, and just a little bit more detail here. The idea is the U.S., in exchange for these things that you mentioned, the U.S. would slash tariffs by half on about $360 billion worth of goods, with the caveat, of course, if China doesn't follow through, we'll raise tariffs again. I'm just questioning the timing on all of this. It doesn't seem to make sense right now. It doesn't seem like Trump needs a deal, and the market's doing very well. So I don't, in terms of those, in that context, as we go a little long here, what do you make anything of the timing specifically?
I do, but we're going to tag you with taking this past 2 minutes. The tariffs that were set to go into effect on Sunday are things that will be directly, affecting consumers. It's going to be electronic goods. It's going to be gaming consoles. It's going to be things people are buying in the last 10 days before Christmas. And so there could have been some personal backlash as stores said, hey, prices are going up or whatever because of tariffs. It could have changed the complexion of this where people finally said, wait a second, you're actually hurting my pocketbook now. I'm a little ticked off about that. And so I don't think that it's particularly coincidental timing. I think that there could have been some pain on the U.S. side if the tariffs on Sunday went into effect. I think the Chinese have been in a lot of pain for a long time, and they would love to just get this behind them and start moving on to the next thing to get their economy revved up again.
Excellent. Thank you, Rodney. And yes, that's true. I'm the one who went long. But let's move on to another topic, which probably won't take us very long, but it was a big deal. The UK held national elections yesterday, and the Conservatives won the largest majority, it's estimated, since 1983. And the important thing here is Boris Johnson is going to be prime minister for another 5 years, and Brexit now looks like a real possibility to get a deal done, and possibly quickly, Rodney.
Well, I did quickly get a deal signed. They need Parliament to vote on the deal that Boris Johnson agreed to with the EU back in October. Ostensibly, they're going to hold that vote in Parliament on January 31st, and they'll agree to a deal. That is the beginning, not the end. This is going to be a long, complicated, nasty thing. It's going to take years to unwind with an unwilling partner. This is a divorce that only one side wants. And so I don't expect things to go easily. I expect people to kind of feel good for a month or so. And then as they get through this vote in Parliament, have another hurrah moment, and then start working on the nitty-gritty details, and it just becomes a slog. But I'll tell you, one thing to note on this, he did win clearly a huge majority, the biggest since, I believe, Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady. It's worth looking at his campaign ads. If people haven't seen it, please go look at the Boris Johnson campaign ads that he ran. They were silly, they were funny, and they struck a chord. People responded to them. And so, I don't know, it would be nice for somebody in the US to inject a little humor and seemingly good-naturedness into what will be an acrimonious election here in 2020.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so that's all I had. Oh, it also raises the possibility of securing a trade deal between the United States and the UK, which would be a good thing. Absolutely. So that's looking bright as well. And okay, so let's just move on again. This week, Rodney, the Fed had a meeting, but they didn't do anything. They kept rates steady between 1.5% and 1.75%. This one was a bit of a snoozer. The markets didn't really react all that much. An important piece of information that came out is the Fed doesn't really plan to do anything in terms of rates, at least for about a year, right, Rodney?
Yeah, and that's the important piece out of this one. The Fed doesn't tell you ahead of time what they're going to do at a meeting. But as Janet Yellen did way back in the day when she first raised rates, they did everything but telegraph that this was not going to be a rate-changing meeting. I mean, they didn't send out a big note saying nothing will happen. But everybody knew it, which is why the market didn't react, because it was widely expected. The interesting part is the voting members vote on changing rates, obviously. Mm-hmm. Well, the full board votes on or doesn't vote. They anonymously put in what they see as rates over the next year and a half, really out to 2 to 3 years. And those numbers were interesting because they showed that a majority of the group doesn't expect any rate change through 2020. And that's voting members as well as non-voting members who will rotate onto the board. And so that was telling that they don't see any real move here over the next year, which is good, right? Finally get the Fed off the table, at least in terms of interest rates, so we can get back to the business of figuring out investments without that artificial push.
So does that give investors confidence in the economy and the markets, at least I would assume if the Fed isn't planning on doing anything, then they see some steady growth, the way we're seeing trends with unemployment and GDP growth?
Absolutely not. I don't think anybody looks at the Fed and said, wow, they have a crystal ball and they're telling us exactly what's going to happen, or even the best probability of what's going to happen. And I think last year is the best example where they raised rates in December just to turn around and cut rates 3 times over the next 8 months, which is a bit idiotic because monetary policy can't work through the system that fast. And so I don't think investors take from it any view of the economy. They just think, wow, thank goodness that group of people standing off to the side so I don't have to figure out them over the next, at least, hopefully 3 to 6 months.
Rodney, you just don't get it. That was all part of the master plan. These people are the experts and they know best. All right, moving on, Rodney. We had the impeachment show rolled on this week. We had a debate on the House floor. It looks like they're going to vote on this. Or did they vote? I don't know. They're voting next week. I don't know where I'm at here. But
they're supposed to vote today.
Impeachment's going to move forward and move on to the Senate. What are you making of these developments?
Please move on. People, CNN had the lowest rating in 3 years during the week of Thanksgiving as the impeachment thing was going on. I'm not knocking CNN. I'm saying that people are tuning out because it's so set in stone. I mean, we're going over the same phone call over and over. I mean, the House committees are finding an infinite number of ways to parse the same words that everybody's known about for months. And so nobody cares about that proceedings, not that they don't care about impeachment. And so I believe people are saying, look, I've got my opinion. I know what I think. Let's get this done. Let's vote for impeachment. Let's get it to the Senate and move on from there. It becomes a game of what happens in the Senate. Mitch McConnell has sent out some smoke signals that this may be where they just have opening statements from each side and then eventually a move for dismissal from the Republicans. And if they get enough votes, it's out the door. I don't think President Trump would like that. I think he wants a trial. If it gets to the Senate, which of course it looks like it will, He wants the ability to bring Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, Adam Schiff, and a list of people up there and just grill them for a long time so that they can change the narrative. The Democrats have been able to control the narrative, of course, because they're the majority party in the House. And now he wants the narrative controlled by the Republicans to put a different face on this thing for the public.
And that was your idea, as we talked about this maybe a week or two ago, is you anticipated a short trial, which looks more likely. So kudos to you. Is there any danger in a long drawn out sort of thing? That seems to be a little bit risky, possibly. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to bring people up and just grill them. And I don't know if people don't care now, maybe they're just not going to care later. I don't know. Well,
that's just it. If there's no new information, you have a lengthy trial so you can further investigate, so you can bring new facts to light. None of that's happening. What we're instead getting is posturing. And so if you're not bringing new facts to light, then you're not changing people's minds because they've already got it all in their hands. For the first time in a Quinnipiac poll, a majority of registered voters said they don't favor impeachment. That's a big number. Well, the first time since everything's come to light. And so it moved toward impeachment and then it moved away again. And so that's kind of losing momentum. So if there is a consequence of a long drawn out thing, I think it goes against the Democrats. This can't be what they were after.
On this topic, Rodney, we got a viewer comment from Jeff, and he echoed some of your statements that you've been making in the past, was essentially, let's move on from impeachment. Let's have Congress actually start doing things and, passing laws and trying to get things done. But interestingly, while Congress is holding these impeachment hearings, they're going to approve the USMCA, which is the trade deal between the United States, Mexico, and Canada to replace NAFTA. There's going to be a vote on that next week. They reached a deal on spending. So on the one hand, they're trying to remove a president who is an absolute danger and a threat to the core of our democracy. On the other hand, we're going to approve the trade deal that he negotiated with other countries and his spending bill. So, but maybe they can do two things at once.
Well, to your point, there's still some things going on. I would love to see a lot more activity. I think our immigration laws are a travesty. It puts the courts, it puts Border Patrol, it puts ICE, it puts the president in a weird place. And so I think Congress should be attacking that and coming to some resolution. They have done the USMCA deal, right. The follow-on to NAFTA. The House did approve a bill for lowering drug costs, although it won't go anywhere because it won't get approved in the Senate or signed by the president. So some things have happened. People need to be watching. One of the big things that happened is Trump continues to appoint and the Senate continues to confirm federal judges. And so he just appointed, and it was just confirmed, another conservative judge to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the appeal court for the Ninth Circuit, which covers the West Coast, California, where a lot of liberal laws come from. And so he's changing the nature of that court. He's flipped 3 circuit courts to a more conservative bent. These are appointments for life. And so while everybody's kind of focused on impeachment, we've got things going on. And whether you love it or hate it, there are some things going on, maybe not the ones that, I would love to see coming out of the House that are big changes like immigration, but it doesn't mean nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said it was a busy week, Rodney. We still have a couple of more topics to cover. One of them came out this morning, which was retail sales disappointing, expected to grow by 0.5%, expanding by only 0.2%. A little bit of good news is at least October was revised from 0.3% to 0.4%. So just a tiny bit of good news. Now, the thing that you mentioned here and the thing that's all over the news this morning is that core retail sales, so-called, when you take out autos and gas, expanded just 0.1%, very small. What'd you make of this report, Rodney?
I didn't make much of it. Thanksgiving fell late this year. There were fewer shopping days between Thanksgiving and the end of November. If we had not shopping days in terms of days of the month, but days between Thanksgiving and, of course, the end of the month. And so I'm not hooked by it. I still think consumers are feeling good. They still got money in their pocket from 5-decade low unemployment. I think when we see the total holiday spending, people are going to be pleasantly surprised by it. So I wasn't worried.
So right. I mean, we talked last week that Black Friday sales, Thanksgiving weekend seemed to be very positive, very strong. So you're essentially saying that the real buying begins from Thanksgiving on, and it's just a matter of counting the days post Thanksgiving. Is essentially
Something like that. There are fewer shopping days, depending on where Thanksgiving falls, right? There are
yeah,
more or fewer shopping days. There are fewer shopping days, but they become more concentrated. Now, people have pulled some of their spending forward, so Black Friday doesn't have the power that it used to.
yeah,
But my goodness, look at it's such an interesting, juxtaposition because people are saying, oh, well, we didn't spend as much over the days of November, blah, blah, blah.
mhm,
But all we're doing is concentrating on minute by minute delivery. The biggest thing is, can you get it in 6 seconds, right? Can you get
yeah,
it in, today? Can you get it in one day? And it's like, well, if people weren't so focused on immediate delivery, wouldn't you be thinking they would be spending differently? So my point is, if delivery is the thing that makes something so attractive, then clearly people can wait till the last minute for that delivery
right.
or to shop. And so I think this is all kind of bundled up. I think we'll see a decent holiday season.
Excellent. Rodney, we also got a report on consumer prices. Those rose 0.3% in November, 2.1% for the year. That was higher than expected, Rodney, and is actually the highest year-over-year growth in 12 months. Some of the things that grew over the month of November were food, education, clothing, and used cars. What'd you make of this one?
I thought it was different. It caught my attention. I mean,
Hmm.
higher inflation is higher inflation, right? This is
Yeah.
people paying more for stuff. And the medical services thing and the housing thing caught my attention because they're things that you can't change. You need those sorts of things. A lot of people in the mainstream media played it down and said, oh, well, this equates to a lower personal consumption expenditure. The Fed's, preferred measure of maybe
Yeah.
1.6. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. That number hasn't come out yet. And so I look at it and it caught my attention. I think it is one of the reasons the Fed knew these numbers, by the way, before they had their meeting, that the Fed was able to say, look, we're going to stand pat because I believe they see inflation trending above their target of 2.1%.
Mm.
And so that'll allow them to stand aside and say, we're just going to let this thing go and see what happens because they're not worried about deflation like they were before. But yeah, caught my attention. We're paying more for stuff.
Curious, you wrote this morning that about real wages, those rising 1.1%, which is essentially that wages are 1.1% higher than inflation. Now, that's about 3%. That comports with what we've seen from the employment
Yep.
reports. Why is that a bad number? To me, I mean, showing
It's not
positive growth
bad.
over inflation.
It's just with unemployment at 5-decade lows, you would expect there to be more um, kind of a bidding war for employees. You think
Mhm.
people would have to do something to get more? I mean, we've all seen it. You don't get quite the service you did before because, frankly, there's always another customer behind you. And also, people are hiring those that they wouldn't have hired before. And so the quality of worker kind of comes down a little bit, particularly in entry-level jobs. But you would expect that for businesses that are just dying to get workers, they would have to pay more for them and would be able to raise prices on the other side because people are buying stuff. So far, we haven't seen that wage push inflation. But if you're looking at this and saying, gee, we're only getting 1.1%, well, what's the missing element? And this is something I don't know the answer. This has been debated now for years.
Yeah.
Why aren't we seeing higher wage inflation or just higher wages with unemployment so low? I don't know the answer yet.
Ronnie, something that caught my eye was inflation in China rose 4.5% year over year, which is the highest in 7 years. And the
Mm,
bit going on there is you've probably seen, Rodney, they're having a real hard time with pork. They had
yeah,
some kind of a flu that devastated just a massive amounts of, and I want to call them crops. I don't know what the right term is, of
herds.
herds. Okay.
But to your point, I mean, the Asian swine flu is a huge deal. They've culled their herds by millions of pigs,
Yeah.
and so it is a staple of their diet. And so it is a tremendous issue. They've pulled a lot out of emergency supply, which they've had. They've bought more from the United States, which I don't think they wanted to do. And so they've had a real problem with it because pork prices are up more than 100%. And
Yeah.
when food is a large percentage of your budget because you don't have a lot, and you see a staple go up 100%, drives inflation. It's a temporary thing. And when I say temporary, I mean a year and a half, 2 years maybe, and then it should come back in. And so I'm not as hooked by that because you can see what caused it. It was an anomaly and it should dissipate.
Well, my question then is would be Could this issue with the pork swine flu have anything to do with needing to maybe get a deal from the United States to buy U.S. pork, or is that not a major concern?
I don't think so. That's not their issue. The pork supply, the pork around the world is going to suffer some because of this culling of the pigs in Asia, certainly in China. And so I don't think that we're going to see a real big impact from the trade war on that. The trade war is more about soybean. Soybean's a huge thing in Asia. They've shifted some of their buying to Brazil and other suppliers, but it's kind of a fungible crop around the world. And so when one person sells more over here, this person has to buy more over there. And so that dislocation should work out as well. But you want your supply chain to be direct. And we've had the supply chain from the US growers to China for years. That's been disrupted. And if we get the trade deal done, hopefully that supply chain falls right back in line.
Absolutely. And now it sounds right that my baby back ribs are going to get more expensive.
They could, although I don't know that it's the price changes are going to come over here like that. That would imply that our supply is being sent over there at the expense of your barbecue. And I don't think you're going to see that.
Well, my barbecue is certainly priority number one. That's all we had for this week. Looking ahead to next week, Rodney, we're going to have housing starts, industrial production, and existing home sales. You have your eye on anything else?
Well, we're all watching the trade deal, right? I mean, I don't think the impeachment is going to do much but move over to the Senate and then provide something of a show. On the numbers, frankly, by the end of next week, I think the markets are going to go flat. I think people are going to protect profits here at the end of the year with the markets up more than 25% on the broad indices. And anybody who is above junior pay grade is going to go away for 2 weeks, go skiing, do whatever they want to do. And so I wouldn't expect much out of the markets. If anything, maybe a little bit down for the next couple of weeks at the end of the year, just as people kind of sell out and push cash to the side.
Right. Excellent. But we will be here to report on any developments. If you have a question like Jeff, who talked about Congress, you could send that to tv@economyandmarkets.com. We will read it on the air. For Rodney Johnson, I'm Dave Okenquist, and this has been Economy and Markets TV.